So now we will discuss Docker volumes or the data persistency with the containers. Okay, so volumes are persistency of data with the containers. Same. One of the challenge of containers is if container is not running, if the container is not running, or the data may be inside its maybe applications or logs. Okay, so we can't get the data. Say if the container is running, at least we can retrieve the data using Docker CP command, or we can check the logs using Docker logs. But if the container is not running, or if the container has been deleted, then we can't get the data. Okay, for persistency, we can attach volumes. So for the persistency, we can attach the volumes. Okay, if you attach the volumes, what happens is, even if the container deleted also, the data has been stored in the volumes. Okay, so here that is the reason we need to attach the volumes. So just like we have an EC2 instance, it's having an EBS volume. But this here we are going to attach in the host itself. The volumes are the preferred mechanisms for persistency data. So now here we have three types of options are there. One is volume, second one is bind mount, third one is TMPFS mount. Okay, so in the volumes we have three options are there in Docker. So what are those? One is volume, Docker volume we can use. Second one is bind mount. Third one is TMPFS mount. So even if it is support three methods, volume itself is recommended. Volume is recommended. So now here how we can attach the volume we'll discuss. Yeah, first we need to create a volume. Second one is bind mount. TMPFS is supported only for Linux. Not for Mac or Windows. Only for the Linux operating system TMPF is supported, but it's recommended to use volumes than bind mount or TMPFS. How to create a volume? In this, what is the volume name? What is the volume name?
My volume.
Yeah, my hyphen wall. My hyphen wall is the volume name. Then Docker volume ls will list all the volumes we have. Docker volume ls and Docker volume inspect will show all the details of my volume. Okay, and the path where that volume stores in our local machine is this path is more important. Okay, so what is the Docker volume path? What is the Docker volume path? Var lib Docker in the Linux machine. Okay, var lib Docker is a Docker space in this volumes. Then the volume name is my hyphen wall. In that underscore data, all the data is going to be stored. Even if the container deleted also,
We can find the data in
the
this
data
part.
is persistent here. Okay. Even if the data has been like persistent, even if we delete the container. Okay. Inspect is to give more details. Then if you want to remove the volume, my hyphen wall. Then we can we can attach a volume. We can attach a volume to container using command either -v or -hyphen mount. Recommended to use mount than -v. So now we are running one container. Yesterday, do you remember what is the path of Tomcat web apps? Yesterday we installed the web apps, right? What is the path? Docker run my Tomcat assume. I'm attaching one import one volume. So this is with a hyphen V. And either we can use hyphen V or hyphen mount. Then can you tell me here hyphen V? Okay, so then what is the volume name here is my Tomcat wall. Yesterday I think user local Tomcat web apps. If I attach this, what happens is if I keep any data in my volume, it would be copied to that container. Okay, then to understand, we have attached a volume to the container. Even if you delete this container also, the data is
persistent.
Yeah, data is persistent. The data is persistent. Okay, so the same option I'll try to use using hyphen mount. Docker run hyphen mount source equal to target equal to then finally what is this Tomcat :9? What is the Tomcat :9?
Version of Tomcat.
Can you tell me now the path of this volume in my local Linux machine? /var lib So this is the path. This is the path of it. Any doubts? So now in the same container, I'll attach one more volume. If I attach like this, what happen is, how many volumes I have used in this?
Two.
Two volumes I have used. One for application, I use all the WAR files, all those I'll keep in my Tomcat wall. And my Tomcat logs I'll use to store the logs. Even if the container is deleted also, the data is persistent in my data is persistent.
Volumes.
in the
Your
volumes. You have to understand, right? Okay, so instead of using the volumes like this, I have already in my local Linux system. Okay, so maybe in home Ubuntu. Okay, so like this in the Linux local Linux file systems I have. Then bind mount is a solution. So if I create a volume, that is in the volume Docker area itself, that volume is getting created. But when we can use bind mount, I have in my home directory, or I have in my logs I want to, local mission logs I want to export. So these kind of things if I want to do, then I need to use bind mount. Instead of mounting, var lib docker volumes we want to mount with container. For this purpose, we need to use a bind mount. We need to use the bind mount. Bind mount is not recommended, but it is supporting. So now here, I'm not attaching to Docker area, Docker volumes like Docker var lib volume, that path. Other file system I can attach using the bind mount. So now here, in the mount, I need to specify type equal to hyphen mount, type equal to bind. So remaining all is same. See here in the source, you no need to specify the volume. I'll write here. Like this, I have the path. Okay. In your home Ubuntu, we have a target directory that I want to copy inside user local Tomcat web apps directory. So then I'm going to use this. So do you understand difference between volume and bind mount? Are you able to understand?
Shrikant, can you please explain once again?
Say in the local directory, if it is other than var lib docker volumes, you have some data that you want to mount with volumes. Okay, say if I go for a volume, it should be in var lib docker volumes. In this itself, I need to have the data. But my data is in home Ubuntu target. Whatever the data here, this, I want to copy inside the container also. Then I'll use bind mount.
Okay, you are saving we are saving the data in two different locations by using bind mount.
No. Already we have data either inside the container or
Inside the volumes.
then volume path I want to save in another Linux directory.
Okay. Yep, understand, Srikanth.
Okay, if it is other than that, any Linux directory is there, then we need to use bind mount.
Okay.
But Docker is recommended to use volumes itself. The Docker is recommended to use on the volumes itself.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Srikanth. Okay.
So now we have one more is there. Here -v option also just explore. Okay, -v also we can use or -- mount also. TMPFS works for only for Linux operating system. TMPFS will works only for the Linux operating system. It's going to store in the swap memory. It's going to store in the swap memory. Okay, in the Linux, we will have double the size of the RAM. It stores the swap memory. But the main problem is if the server rebooted, the data is also going to lose. So we don't use the TMPFS, but one option is there. Because for persistency itself, we are coming to
Volumes.
But TMPFS data are normally, like if the server reboots, all the data in the RAM is going to be lost. The double the size of the RAM, we are going to keep as the swap memory. In the swap memory, this data is going to store. Say where it is storing is in the RAM, its memory is going to store that. But we don't get much benefits, but this is one option is available. The mount type we need to use. Type equal to instead of bind, we need to, if you don't specify any type, it's volume. Otherwise, we need to specify the type is TMP.
FS.
So here --- TMPFS also we can use. But we are using Docker volumes itself. But in the Kubernetes, we'll use persistent volumes. So here we are calling as Docker volumes. In the Kubernetes, that is called as persistent volumes. Okay, so we'll attach all these volumes, networks, all these in the real time. We are going to attach through script itself, not through the commands. To understand the concept, we are discussing. Can you tell me what is the path of the container? Sorry, what is the path of the Docker volume? What is the path of the Docker volume?
var/library.
Yeah, var lib
Docker.
volumes, your volume name, in that again
_data.
_data. So in this we are going to keep it. Okay, what is the difference between Docker volume and bind mount?
In two different directories, we are storing the volume.
Only inside the Docker volume area we can store using the volumes. But other than that, any Linux directory if you have,
We can store in containers.
yeah, we can use it bind mount. TMPFS
Only in Linux we can use this TM.
It stores in the swap memory.
Yeah.
Stores in the swap memory is going to store the details. Okay,
So what is this $PWD?
that is the wild environment variable. Say in currently in which directory you are running this command, to the directory it copies.
Okay, the present working directory.
A present working directory. So you can give the path also there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So now here we have one more concept is there. We'll discuss these volumes and networks also. Docker networking. We need to understand Docker networking also. Okay. By default, we created a container. We expose it to outside or not?
Yes, sir.
So we expose the container. Okay. So now here we have one container. Yesterday we opened that using the host IP, and from outside also we access or not? The access from outside. For that, Docker provides bridge network. Okay, so can you tell me by default in the networking, if you don't do anything also, Docker is providing a bridge network. What is the advantage of bridge network? What is the advantage of bridge network?
To access container from the outside.
Yeah, to access the container from the outside. Okay, so we have published one port. Using that port number from that host, we can access. Okay, so then we have different type of network drivers we have. So one is bridge. Second one is a host. Can you tell me the difference between bridge and host? If I give host only from
That port number, the container will be accessed.
only from that host itself, where we have installed Docker, from that machine only it's accessible. Not from
Other host. I mean, other
not from
ports.
other missions. Only from that host only it's accessible. Okay, so from outside it's not
Accessible.
accessible. You understand, right? Difference between bridge and host.
Yeah, Srikanth. Yeah.
Okay, bridge and host will how to attach, but by default, if you don't do anything, also will get.
Host.
So by default, we'll get a host.
Bridge.
Sorry, bridge.
Yeah.
We don't get host.
Okay.
Host is only once we configure, right?
By default, that is the reason we are able to access it. If with the host, we can't access from outside.
So you mean that we need to configure the host, right?
If you want host explicitly, I don't want to give the public access, then I want to give host.
Yes.
Okay, so then we have one more is there. Overlay this in the swarm mode. I'll explain. What is a group of Docker engines in the real time will keep in the swarm mode. Okay, Docker swarm is group of Docker engines. In the swarm mode, we will get overlay. By default in swarm, like one host to another host, the communication, all these need to happen. That is the reason in swarm will get overlay. None means What is none? It's isolated. Even I can't access from
Outside.
no from host
Inside.
also.
Okay.
Okay, I can't access either like from outside or
From the host inside.
from the host also. It's isolated kind of thing. Is it fine?
Yes, Srikanth. Yeah.
Then we have one more method is there, Mac VLAN. Mac ID is attached. Okay, so but one of the challenge with the containers is for every virtual machine normally will have a MAC ID, just like mobile will have an IMEI number, right? By default with the bridge or other ways, we don't get the MAC IDs. But if you want to give the for every container MAC ID, then we need to use the driver is
Mac VLAN.
Mac VLAN.
Mac VLAN. Say if I have any specific requirement of every container also, I want a individual MAC ID. Maybe going forward, we may get these kind of requirements also for the auditing purpose. From which container that communication came, all those. But now we are getting the host MAC itself. Okay, so then we need to use
Mac VLAN.
MAC VLAN. IPv LAN is both IPv4 and IPv6 we can attach. Both IPv4 and IPv6 we can attach through
IP VLAN.
IPv LAN. So these all like we need the concepts. All we have again in the Kubernetes we have. But to understand the concepts here, we are learning Docker. All these we are managing through Kubernetes itself in the production environments. Can you tell me what are the network drivers we have?
Mac VLAN and IP VLAN.
No, all the network drivers. Bridge.
Host.
Bridge, host, overlay, non.
So
Yeah,
bridge
Mac VLAN.
by default we are getting. Okay, so what is IPv LAN? Both IPv4 and IPv6 we can attach. Both IPv4 and IPv6 we can attach. So how to say in the above example, here I used my Tomcat wall. If you want to create this volume, can you tell me what is the command? If you want to create a volume, then what is the command? Docker volume create my Tomcat wall. Are you able to understand? So here we created the volume, right? In the initial step, we created a volume. Docker volume. But in this example, we didn't use the volume my wall. What is the volume name we use?
My Tomcat wall.
Yeah. If you don't create a volume also, when we use in the command, that volume would be created. You understand?
Yes, Srikanth. Yeah.
Okay, but that's not possible with the network. That means if you want to use a network, then before what we need to do?
We have to attach the network.
So first we need to create the network. Okay, if you want to use any network, first we need to
Create the networking.
create a network. Otherwise, we can't attach. Without having the network, if we try to attach, it won't allow us. It won't.
Allow. Yeah.
So normally, we are going to publish the ports also, right? -p is the command we are using. So using the publish p, we are going to attach the port numbers. And by default, anyhow, we'll get the bridge itself. That is the reason it's accessible. So now here we have the bridge, host, overlay, IPVLAN, MAC VLAN, then none. So by default, we are getting so these are all the Docker network drivers. So just go through these all. In the SWAM mode, which one will get?
Overlay.
Yeah, overlay is the network driver supported in the SWAM mode. Then how to create a volume, we'll discuss. By default, okay. So by default, we are getting default bridge itself, but even we can create our own bridge networks also. Those are called as custom bridge. By default, if we don't use also, okay, by default we'll get the default bridge. Otherwise, we can use our own custom or user-defined bridge networks. Host, only with the host. I don't want to give to outside. Then I'm going to use the host. Then I'm going to, if we don't use also, by default, we are going to get the bridge. Now this is going to create a bridge. Here I didn't give Docker network create. My net. Okay, so this is creating which network driver? This is creating by default. If you don't give any type also, driver also, it creates
Bridge.
only. Then Docker network, like inspect once. My net. ls. RM. We want to remove RM. So what are the Docker volume, Docker network commands also we'll discuss. RM is to remove it. Now, we have created a network. What is the name of the network? My-net. And by default, if you don't specify any driver also, it's a bridge. And we're attaching it to the container. Okay. So what is the command we use? What is the command we use here? Hyphen network. Hyphen
Network.
network and that network. But before that, if you don't create that network, it won't allow us. So my net, that before itself you need to create that
Network
network. Otherwise, it won't
allow us to.
allow us to create. Okay, so like this we can attach, but already a container is already created. By default, that uses default bridge, but I want to use my network bridge. Then what is the command? To the existing container. Attach networking to existing container. Okay, the first step is, till now that my Nginx container is not there. Then I'm attaching, but already I have created. Okay, then Docker network connect. The opposite one is Docker network disconnect. That means I want to remove that one. Then again it comes the default one itself. So here try to understand one concept. If we have two containers, by default, they won't communicate. We want to communicate each other. Attached to same network. So I'll tell one example. I have one Tomcat container and it want to communicate with MySQL container. For database, MySQL also are running as a container. Then both the containers I want to connect. Both the containers I want to connect. Then what is the solution here we have?
It's to the same network.
Yeah, we need to attach both of them to the same network. Okay, explicitly we don't need to link them. We need to attach to same network. So we need to attach to the same network. Then the communication is going to come by default. Then the communication is going to come
By default.
by default. Explicitly, we don't need to link to the containers. That is a very old method. The new method is
Overlay.
overlay. What is overlay? No. Overlay will comes in the swarm mode itself.
Okay.
Okay, so here two are two containers also attached to the same user-defined bridge. So here in this scenario, user-defined bridge is mynet. By default, we'll get a default bridge also. That you no need to attach also. By default, we'll get that. Then host. The host you no need to create. Only one host we can attach. Hyphen network we need to keep. host. That means this is not accessible from outside. It is accessible only from it is accessible only
Host.
Inside host.
from the inside itself. Okay. Say only for dev purpose, for like I don't want access from outside, then we need to give.
Host.
Okay, this one we are going to use in those scenarios only we are going to use it. The remaining all not that much important. Either host overlay anyhow in the swarm mode will get. You don't mostly will use like this user defined bridge networks, because two containers I want to attach to communicate with each other in the real time. Okay. So try to run these all the commands and create the containers and attach the containers. Okay, and detach the networking. So these all try to run. Okay, so what are the Docker like different components and what is the purpose of those components? We'll discuss. So all these days we have installed Docker daemon, or maybe it's a host or engine. With this itself, we got CLI also. So where this having the capability to run, so we can run the containers. So we can run the containers with that. Okay, so then the Docker network for the networking. Docker volumes. So here we have Docker file. So the most important thing is the Docker file in the real time. Docker compose. Docker mission. So we have Docker compose and Docker mission we have. Docker swarm. Docker services. Docker stack. Docker hub or DTR in AWS we have ECR. Excuse me. Okay, so now here we need to understand. Today we discuss about volumes and so what is the Docker compose is? If we want to create, multiple containers, we'll use Docker compose. Normally using the Docker run command, I can create only one container, but I want to create multiple containers as a single shot. Then the solution is
Docker compose.
Docker compose. So Docker compose is used to create multiple
Containers.
As a single file we can create. In the real time, we are going to use Docker compose or Docker stack itself to deploy the applications. But the very important one is Docker file. We can create our own customized images using Docker file. Okay, so even in AWS also, we can create our own customized AMIs or not. With our application, we can create our own AMIs. Okay, in the same way here, we can create our own images using
Docker file.
Yeah, can you tell me the difference between Docker file and Docker compose?
Docker Compose, we can multiple containers.
The
And
Docker file
Docker,
is,
we can customize our own images.
yeah, once we create our own images, where we are going to store them,
Docker Hub.
a Docker Hub or ECR. You want to store them privately,
DTR. Docker Trust Registry.
Docker trusted
Yes.
registry is there. It's fine, right?
Yes, sir.
Say Docker mission is outdated, no one is using. We can create say those instances in AWS or Azure we can create. Now we are not using Docker mission. Okay, say an EC2 instance can be created with the Docker in automatically we can create using Docker mission, but we are not using Docker on the EC2 instances in the real time. AWS having their own solution called as ECS. What is that? Elastic Container Service. ECS is a Docker Swarm kind of environment. We can get it from the AWS. Okay, so what is Swarm Services Stack? I'll explain in the next classes. I'll go for one compose file, try to understand. So we'll have a compose.yaml file. Compose.yaml file. So one sample compose file, try to remember. Okay, so what is the first line of the compose file? Services. Okay, so here, can you tell me how many containers it will create? How many containers is going to create in this example? One is DB, second one is,
MySQL. 2.
no. In the DB itself, it is using MySQL or MariaDB.
Okay.
Second one is WordPress.
WordPress, yeah.
Okay, so here what is this meaning is, if you don't want MariaDB, then comment that line, uncomment this line. In the DB itself, either MariaDB or MySQL we can use. Okay, so this a hash meaning is it's a comment. Okay, and volumes, all these we have passed port numbers, all these in the normally in the Docker run command itself we used to give, but all these now we are giving in the YAML file. Okay, so then in the second WordPress we are giving the image, ports, okay, environment, volumes. So here volumes also it's getting created. Volumes also it is getting. So here DB underscore data, this volume here it's getting created. Okay, so like this multiple containers we can create using
Docker Compose.
Docker Compose. So, but in the real time, we'll use Kubernetes itself for this. Okay, but we require a knowledge on Docker Compose also. Okay, say a sample compose file also we require a knowledge how to create all these. I'll show in the tomorrow class. But very important one for us is Docker file, because once we create our own images, we are pushing into registry. Then we don't use Docker Compose or Docker to deploy those. We are going to use the Kubernetes. But those Docker images are required for us. Are you able to understand?
Yes, Srikanth. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the reason we need to know Docker file. I'll share one link also, that Docker file. Just go through once in the real time. Even in the Kubernetes also, we can't skip Docker files. Remaining all we can skip it. Okay. So what is the syntax of the Docker compose file also? Try to, all the options what we have given in the Docker command itself, we are giving in the form of YAML file. But for multiple containers, we can create it. For multiple containers as a single shot in the, say in this example, we kept only 2 files. But we can give, you want 10 containers also, we can give those 10 containers. Okay.
Yes, sir.
How to link 2 containers?
By network.
We need to attach the
Network.
Network.
user-defined bridge network. User-defined
Bridge
Bridge
network.
bridge network, then the communication is going to happen between those 2 containers. And volumes, networks, multiple containers, all those we want to create as a single shot. Then what is the solution?
Docker compose.
Docker compose. By default, we don't get Docker compose. We need to install Docker compose on top of Docker engine. So we install the Docker, right? So try to install Docker compose also on top of this.
Okay.
Okay, so then once you create this file, assume I kept this file as Docker hyphen compose dot YAML or YAML. Then Docker hyphen compose up command I need to use. Docker hyphen compose up. Okay, then all the containers are getting created. And if you want to use in the detach mode, give hyphen D. It's recommended to give hyphen D option. So what this down will do, it will remove all the containers. Say start to stop, all those operations also not on one container level we are doing. We are doing with
Multiple containers.
multiple containers. So that is the advantage of using
Docker compose.
Docker compose. But we don't use Docker compose. Maybe initial stages we are using. Now we are using Kubernetes itself for all this.
And so the path for the database like db underscore data, right? So we
That's
can
the volume name, you can give whatever the name you want.
for the path, sir. I need to say that.
That path should be perfect with our application. Varlib MySQL is mandatory.
Okay.
So yesterday for Tomcat web apps, we have that path, right? For Tomcat, that path only we need to use.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Name db underscore like data, whatever the name you want, you can give it.
like for this WordPress, we can give what live and my this WordPress, right?
The db underscore data will reside in the local machine in varlib docker volumes data. Inside the container, varlib MySQL data is persistent.
Okay.
So even if this container stopped also, we want the data, right?
Yes, sir.
The data normally stores in varlib MySQL, but that I'm exporting that to volume.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other doubts? So focus more on Docker file, because every day that's we are going to use in the job. Okay,
Yes, sir.
sure. I'll stop here. So yesterday one itself try to run more and these commands try to type. Tomorrow I'll show all this. But Docker file first we need to discuss.
Okay.
Okay, sure.